Hi there, art nerds. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas. So I have another installment in my advent calendar of Papercraft activities for you guys today. Today we have Kara snoozing in a mitten that you can pose almost anywhere. So this is a take on the standees that we've been working on, like the Naomi Caroler or the Gingerbread Boys or the Tinsel Trouble cat, except this one is designed to work better horizontally. So this one is great if you have a lot less space. This one is also really easy. It might be the easiest of the paper children we've done, other than the snow day Paperchild who was trapped inside a clear plastic ornament. You guys will find all of those in my Paperchild tutorial playlist here on the channel. Now for this one, I am going to combine the watercolor portion of our tutorial along with the assembly portion. We've done a lot of watercolor tutorials the past few days, so I don't really feel the need to explain too much to you guys. If you want to learn how to watercolor something like this, you can check out one of the other Paperchild tutorials here in the series. I do want to point out, and I said this in the Naomi Caroler video, that I think this pad of Canson XL watercolor paper was bound backwards because all of the illustrations that I did from that pad ended up being on the wrong side of the paper, and I'm really careful about what side of the paper I use normally. So I need to double check with that paper before I ever use it. So the thing about watercolor paper, especially cheap watercolor paper like Canson XL watercolor paper, is that it definitely has a side that's more receptive to watercolor, that's designed to take watercolor, and a side that is not designed for watercolor. And this is the side that I painted on today. And I did not realize that. I kind of suspected it when I painted the Naomi Caroler, and I had some trouble, but I really knew I had done goofed when I started putting water on this one here. So this is an illustration of Kara from my comic, 7-inch Kara, taking a snooze in a warm mitten. I thought you guys would think it is really cute. You can find a printable line art down in the description below if you want to color along. If you do, I recommend you print on something like cardstock or heavier. Now, if you just want to assemble this cutie, I also have a full color a full color illustration for you to print and cut out down in the description below as well. The other materials I'm using, but you can use whatever you want to use, are the core mini palette, and this one is starting to show its wear and tear. You can see the bottom of some of those half pans. It's gotten a lot of use this year. I'm also using a selection of round watercolor brushes. Most of them are silver black velvet brushes. I'm using the wrong side, by accident, of Canson XL watercolor paper. This is a really inexpensive, accessible watercolor paper. If you're new to watercolor and you want to kind of dabble around, it's really not too bad for beginners, and you can find it just about anywhere from Walmart to Michael's to even really nice art supply stores. So it's a really common, ubiquitous watercolor paper that you should have no trouble finding. I inked this illustration with a Sakura Pigma FB brush pen. Those are also increasingly easy to find. I think I saw them at Walmart the other day. And those are waterproof and alcohol marker proof brush pens, so they're great for a variety of art. They're a good workhorse art material that I highly recommend to anybody who's interested in cartoony traditional art. I used some blue painter's tape and a back of an old watercolor pad, so some chipboard, to secure my watercolor paper, just to keep it from buckling and kipping as we're adding water to this. I also have a cup of clean water with a paint puck down at the bottom. The paint puck is a little scrubby silicone thing that helps get excess paint out of your brush, so you're going to have a cleaner watercolor painting overall. So some of the granulation, sedimentation, and just drying weirdness that you're going to see here, as well as the lack of color saturation and depth, is due to the fact that I'm painting on the back of the paper by accident, which is not a watercolor receptive surface. And I keep pointing this out to you guys because I troubleshoot a lot of people's watercolor issues when I'm at conventions or here online or over on my Discord server, the Paint Box. And I think it is important for me to point out mistakes in my own work to you guys, not just to start this cycle of harsh self-criticism, but if you guys can learn from my mistakes and not make those mistakes, then those make my mistakes a little bit more worthwhile. So for this one, since she's sleeping in a mitten, it was really important that I try to capture the texture of the mitten, that large knit, especially compared to Kara's size. I mean, she's only 7 inches tall, so you would really see the knitted links and the yarn in a mitten like this. Now, it's a little bit more challenging to capture that since, I was painting on the wrong side of the paper, but I think I did a pretty good job with it after all. Now, if you guys enjoy my art, but you might be new to the channel, I would love it if you take a moment to check out the comic she's from. You can read it for free as a webcomic at 7inchkara.com. Or if you're like me and you prefer to just buy books and then binge the books in the tub rather than read webcomics, so I end up backing a lot of Kickstarters. You can order the first volume through my shop, the Natto shop. I'll link that down in the description below. And you can pre-order the second volume. You know, we were supposed to have that second volume here at the house like last week, but the shipping company couldn't get the truck down the street we live on, and that caused all kinds of weird delays. So you can pre-order volume 2, and I'll send it out to you guys once I get a hold of it myself. I also want to point out that various parts of this tutorial have been time-lapsed to varying degrees. Some of them have been sped up more than others. I don't paint this fast. Most people don't paint this fast. And I've also removed all of the dry time for the watercolor, so I just click the pause button while I'm waiting for the water to evaporate. So this isn't necessarily a real reflection of how long it would take you to paint something like this. It took me about 3 hours the other night, and it was a good humidity night here in Louisiana, and I had the fan on as well, so the dry times weren't too bad. If I'd been painting on the correct side of the paper, the dry times would have been even better. So now that we're about done with the watercolor, I'm just going to go in and add some white highlights using white gouache. So I allowed this piece to dry for several hours, and now I'm carefully removing it from the chipboard by peeling away the blue painter's tape. And if you use blue painter's tape, you're going to want to peel away at a 90-degree angle so it doesn't tear into your illustration. So here's the finished watercolor illustration. If you don't feel like coloring or painting your own, you'll find this link down in the description below. If you're going to play along for the second part of our tutorial, I recommend you print this on cardstock or heavier paper. I also want to point out that you guys are free to color this however you want. You can change her skin color, you can change her hair color, you can change anything you want about this. You can use it as inspiration for your own original characters. I just wanted to share this tutorial with you guys. It's my Christmas gift to y'all. So in order to turn her from 2D to 2.5D, you're gonna need a few materials. Like I said, this one is one of the simpler Paperchild tutorials in my Paperchild series, but you're gonna need scissors and XActo Blade, double stick tape, single-sided tape, some Popsicle Sticks, and you might want some foam tape. If you have some fine point scissors, you might want those as well. So the first thing I want to do is I want to remove the excess paper, and I want to remove it in as clean and straight a cut as possible. So I'm using a paper cutter to help me out here because I cannot cut a straight line to save my life. It doesn't matter how many rulers and lasers you've got, I will not be able to do it. So I'm using a paper cutter to help me out. If you don't have a paper cutter, that's totally fine. You don't necessarily need to have one. Don't go out and buy one for this. But if you find that you're cutting a lot of paper, they are really handy. And as somebody who makes zines, I end up using a paper cutter pretty frequently. So we've chopped off most of the excess paper. We're going to set that aside and use that a little bit later on in the tutorial. So now I'm going to use a pair of scissors just to cut the excess paper from this. If you have a Cricut or another die cutting machine and you're familiar with it, it could be a great chance to pop that thing out and use that to cut out all of these paper children. It's going to make assembly so much faster. I'm doing this by hand because even though I have a die cutting machine, I wanted to demonstrate the cutting process for some of you guys who might not have one. I've done that with stickers in the past as well. So I'm doing what's known as fussy cutting, where I am cutting on the outline. You can do what's known as a halo cut, where you leave a halo of paper around the image. It doesn't really matter. It's not all that noticeable once you've posed her. I cut off the bulk of the paper. This one's one of the really easy ones to cut because there's a lot of long straight lines or very gentle curves compared to some of the other paper children where there's a lot of little finicky things. You can get into these smaller areas using an XActo blade. Since I painted on the wrong side of the paper, it means the pigments on this paper are very prone to just kind of like lifting off if I'm not careful. So I'm using a piece of watercolor paper just to protect the paper from my hand as I'm cutting. So she's all cut out. That really wasn't too bad. This one comes together really quickly. So the next thing you're going to need is some of that scrap watercolor paper. So I have a long rectangle. It's about 12 inches long by maybe a ½ inch wide. And I'm going to cut this long rectangle of paper in half. So I just fold it in half to get that midway point and snip it. I'm going to fold these two long rectangles of paper into smaller triangles. That's going to be our base that she's going to balance on. And since there isn't any weight in the front and we're not counteracting height, since this is a really horizontal Paperchild, we don't have to use any coins to help weight her or help balance her. So I'm going to fold over one of the edges and use some double stick tape just to secure the flap, and then some single-sided tape just for double security. Now I live in a really humid area and paper tends to curl in really humid areas, so I'm using a popsicle stick just to give her some additional stability. You can get popsicle sticks down at Dollar Tree. You don't even have to use a popsicle stick. You could use a pipe cleaner or a stick from the yard, or even just some paper cut to size. I used my double stick tape to attach my popsicle stick to the back of my Paperchild, and now I'm just using some single-sided tape to make sure we get a really good adherence. Finally, I'm going to apply some double stick tape to the length of the popsicle stick and attach my two little triangles. And we're doing that towards the bottom of the mitten. I should have said that earlier on. All right, so this is one of the easiest Paperchild tutorials I've shared with you guys. It utilizes some really basic techniques, and this could be a really great one to do together with a younger artist in your life. So these are the materials that we need. I know it looks like a lot, but they're the same materials we've used in most of the other Papercraft and Paperchild tutorials. So once you have your basic materials on hand, you're going to use them pretty often. So all that's left is to find a good place to pose her. And I thought taking a snooze underneath the tree next to Pancake would be a really, really ideal spot. I hope I'll see you guys again tomorrow when we assemble the angel who goes on the top of our Christmas tree. That's going to be another two-part tutorial, watercolor and assembly. And the angel is made up of 3 separate parts, so it's really an exciting one, and I've never done anything quite like it. So I hope you guys will join me again tomorrow for another Paperchild Papercraft. Have a wonderful day, guys. Bye!